The Phantom of Liberty.
The Phantom, perfect. Okay.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyhow, I'm so happy to present Daniel Rothbart here with
Smadar Sheffi, Dr. Smadar.
Doctor, and our friend Carter Ratcliff, not a stranger to WhiteBox, but a stranger to GreenBox at WhiteBox. Carter, how are you doing there?
Okay, how are you?
All right, listening to poets still.
Good.
Like that. So anyhow, we're just doing a transmission through WhiteBox Facebook, right? And Instagram. And I'd like to present Daniel Rothbart to present himself, but this is part of GreenBox at WhiteBox, a program and sustainability that I think we deserve to bring to this neighborhood, the Lower East Side. And we're going to be, inviting a lot of youth and community members to try to incline them into, all the things we call sustainability, right?
Absolutely.
And we will not talk about the tariffs below 60th Street today.
That's right. Thank goodness we didn't drive in today. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. So let me just, I'm Daniel Rothbart, an artist and writer, and I'd like to thank Juan Puntas and Yohanna and WhiteBox for hosting this event. And Francine Hunter McGivern for her love and support throughout this project. I'd like to introduce Dr. Smadar Sheffi, who a visionary curator from Tel Aviv, who developed this project with me and curated the installation in the Pool of the Arches in Ramle, Israel. And we have a very distinguished, guest and participant in the project, that being Carter Ratcliff, a great author and poet, art writer and poet. So today we're going to talk about this project, RamleAnthropocene, which involves my installation of floating sculpture in the Pool of the Arches, and also has interventions by poets from the Middle East and from the United States on the theme of water, and also a collaborative film that I did with Carlo Giuliano on the which involves footage of some floating projects in the Hudson Valley, coupled with a reading of the 26th canto of the Dante's Inferno, the Canto of Ulysses, which was also a chapter in Primo Levi's Survival at Auschwitz. So to begin, I'd like to just play 6 minutes of footage of the project, RamleAnthropocene. So I should have given a little bit more context, perhaps, at the beginning. What the space that you saw is a cistern from the 9th century that was built by the Umayyad Caliphate. It was used for watering animals. It collected rainwater through oculi and possibly also from an aqueduct. And this whole project began, during COVID, during a period when we were all completely isolated. And I was kind of dreaming about what my life might be were I to install my sculpture anywhere I could. And I was looking for the most, perfect, environment for those pieces. And I discovered the city of Ramle, the Pool of the Arches, and I reached out to Dr. Sheffi, the founding chief curator of the Center for Contemporary Art in Ramle, and we began a conversation around realizing the project. Would you like to say something, Smadar?
Yes. I mean, first of all, it was a very interesting time, and these talks at the beginning sounded extremely theoretical. It wasn't clear where things were going. And as we spoke about it, and I looked into Daniel's former work with water, then there were suddenly so many threads and so many beginnings and so many ideas that you could see that they were related to things that were happening in the environment of Ramle, of the Pool of Arches, and things that we could connect. And it actually became some kind of, let's say, fascinating puzzle of seeing how works from very different places can work together, especially when we're addressing, let's say, the global issues of our time.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that I remember during our conversations that you said Israel is an Anthropocene nation, particularly
Absolutely.
when it comes to water, because water is such a rare commodity in the Middle East. And, Israel developed drip irrigation. They recycle 90% of, water mostly for agricultural use. And they're also big pioneers in water desalination. And they're also faced with huge challenges in terms of the Dead Sea,
Yes.
receding, several meters every year and such. But I think one of the really interesting kind of elements of this project and was also working with this medieval site where you had a really nice kind of blend of aesthetics and sustainability, really, because this is it's such a graceful, elegant environment. They, if you can imagine these vaulted arches, with oculi, crowned with oculi, so shafts of light are shining down into the water, changing at different times of the day, and very special. And it, somehow it survived terrible earthquakes that leveled, other major
Most of the city.
buildings. That's right. And so it was like, it was really interesting to work with that kind of space also. I mean, I've been interested in the theme of reenchantment, with my work and in the Gowanus Canal, for example, kind of repositioning the viewer in terms of their perception of a familiar waterway. But in this case, the space itself was so magical and beautiful. But I think my sculptures also provided a kind of they're enigmatic, and I think they help kind of help people to rethink their impression of the Pool of the Arches, and particularly since the visitors would take boats and actually row through the installation. So the arches kind of framed one's perception of the space And it was ever changing, just like the mutability of water. Actually, if you come tomorrow, there's a big event at the JCC Manhattan. We're screening films from RamleAnthropocene, and there are going to be readings by two American poets, Carter Ratcliff, The Architecture of Water, and Richard Malazzo on the Drowning Our Sorrows. So, but let me read just very quickly. This is a brief passage from a forthcoming book I'm doing with Richard Malazzo. Richard was writing about some of my floating sculptures. It's very brief. Your sculptures look strangely inspired. Your sculptures look like strangely inspired solar outcasts, sublime or sublimated space junk, and I mean that kindly. One of them looks like an umbrella beckoning to an apocalyptic monsoon. Another, a three-headed mythic creature that has veered off its cosmic course and seems to be soaking in the peace and quiet of this watery cul-de-sac. And still others, a necklace of emeralds, or are those glowing nuggets of plutonium, searching for the throat of a Beatrice, or several starry constellations that simply mistook a black hole for a distant sun, but were unfortunately, like Daedalus and Icarus, hurtled back to this watery grave, not unlike the metaphysical entities relentlessly abandoned in Valerie's poem "Cemetery by the Sea." So, anyway. So they're definitely outsiders. These works. They're made of aluminum and found glass, and they have tracery that kind of reflects the architecture in certain ways. But so it's a dialogue certainly between the architecture and the space and the water. Carter, you wrote a poem, to accompany this project. Would you like to speak to the this theme? And
Well, the poem is The Architecture of Water, and I wasn't referring specifically to the cistern, but the extraordinary confluence of the water in the cistern plus the amazing architecture itself must have triggered this thought that water, of course, isn't architectural, but that we can carry over to our experience of water or our thoughts about water, our sense of architectural order. The huge difference being that unless an earthquake comes or something, architecture is stable, whereas water is always changing. So the poem turns on that contradiction. It's not a realistic poem by any means. It asks you to reimagine the way water might be in the world and for itself and for us. So I talk about the beams of the architecture of water, its beams, its staircases, its windows, all of those things transposed into a kind of aqueous state of flux. And then it ends up talking about the idea that we too are in a state of flux, that everything is always ending, always re-beginning, and that, of course, did you mention this time or in an earlier conversation that we too are aqueous? A large percentage of our physical being is literally water. And so we have this kind of kinship with it, which we don't always acknowledge. I guess I was hoping to suggest with this poem kind of the way that we live. We don't just live in a world with water. In a certain sense, we live in it. It lives in us. And anyway, that's sort of what the poem is about. If you can ever say what a poem is really about.
sure.
The thought that I had, I really liked the comments that you read, the description of your work. There are a lot of very evocative images there, and it occurs to me that your work is figurative. I mean, it can be seen as abstract, and it's very rich just formally if you look at it as abstraction, but it has all these figurative implications, or sometimes straight out. I mean, they look like creatures you know. And the question is, what kind of creatures? We can identify with some of them. They kind of reflect our own sense of ourselves as figures or as physical structures, but they also, and I don't know, well, you've been installing them in water for a long time, the Hudson River and elsewhere, but they have the look of aqueous creatures too, water inhabitants. So they fit in, but at the same time, they're really clear and powerful structures relate them to the structure of the cistern as well, the architecture of the cistern.
What we were speaking about also when we were having these discussions during COVID and after that when we met, of course, it was really about the way that these creatures, these wondrous creatures of Daniel fit inside the Cisterian. And we were thinking of them both because sometimes the material itself that Daniel uses are these balls of glass that refer to these kind of weights, these weights of Japanese fishing nets that he'd found as a boy on the West Coast. And this idea of having this bubble of glass, having something that is a closed world within another closed world, because the Cisterian actually is a kind of it's almost a kind of ecosystem. It's underground, it's closed, it's got these openings to the world. So the world does come into it, and we come into it, but it's a kind of bubble inside this urban space about it. It's also kind of historic bubble because it's really remained more or less as it was built in the 9th century, which is quite amazing in a place that has had so many different regimes, different rulers, earthquakes, and this place somehow miraculously stayed almost at its early state. And then Daniel brings in these creatures with these glass bubbles, and it's one thing inside the other. And he made these quite amazing kind of, I call them almost necklaces of these beads of content. And this also had to do with Daniel. Daniel also wrote about Jewish metaphysics, and when you think about Kabbalah and these ideas of the broken glass, the vessels that are full of light and that somehow contain the light of the world in a way. And these things that sound abstract became inside the Pool of Arches during the day when you have the light pour inside and onto these glass structures with the metal, with the aluminum. And it just creates wonderful moments, and people that are there, and you row inside the world. That also a very different, the way that you relate to art while you're doing some kind of physical action, which is not walking or sitting as we usually do, is very different. So the whole dialogue with the shapes of the things, with their associations, with the space, when you know about its history, it becomes some kind of, I'd say it's really like the very Wagnerian kind of Gesamtkunstwerk, something that is really quite overwhelming. And during the readings that Daniel conducted, your poem was one of them, when we had it on video, it became a very, very special kind of moment. I think a marriage of history and architecture and art, and the spoken word, of course.
Oh, beautiful. No, I was also delighted by the way that I love what you're saying about the Kelly Pot, or these shards of the broken vessels, and of course it's almost Duchampian too, the air of Paris. I mean, these
Yes.
Somehow these glass, spheres float across the Pacific Ocean and weather storms and currents and all for years and years and years, pack ice, and then they finally just kind of magically appear on the sand of the beaches of our West Coast. Yeah, it's interesting, and I think that it's true what you're saying also about water. Certainly, over 60% of our bodies is water. As babies in our mother's womb, we're surrounded by the amniotic fluid. So there's something really intimate about our relationship with water, but also something completely vast and incomprehensible. 70% of the ocean surface is covered with water of unfathomable depths and mysterious. And there's certainly a quality of mystery also in this pool. I didn't mention it, but I was riding home one day after installing the work on the train from Ramle to Herzliya, and I met this Berkeley professor who was doing this oral history project with mostly Palestinian Arabs in Jordan. But he told me that there's a tradition, among the that there's in fact a genie that lives in the pool, that this goat, like this magical goat that lives in the, and there was something truly magical about the way that the light traversed the glass and then created these kind of flickering, scintillating patterns on the stone wall. I mean, it was something that was so hoary and ancient too. I mean, and the layers of history and paint, and the Brits had put up these kind of metal, braces to keep it from collapsing, but I don't think there was any danger of that. I mean, that it's something that's really made for to withstand time. So, yeah. So I think, but I also think that Smadar, you pointed out that there's it's something, because it's something we share and something we all need. It brings people together, and like the genie in the pool. I mean, each culture kind of brings a different kind of perspective, a different kind of mythology,
Yeah.
So all those things are kind of interesting and worth exploring. How do you feel about the sense of community? You've observed perhaps more people actually interacting with the sculptures and going down and riding in the boats, and all kinds of different people experience the project. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I must point out it's the city that Daniel the work is in, Ramle. It's a city with different communities. It's a very diverse society, both in religious sense and socio-ecological. And the pool is a place it's a shared public space, which is I'd say one of the favorite places of the city. It's definitely one of the cities considered a jewel in its crown. And many people come to see it because of the archaeology. And in this case, when coming to see art there, I think that people had, first of all, Daniel's sculptures, because you can read so many things into them. You can see them as creatures, you can see them as dancing. And they unfold. It's when you enter the pool, you see one part of the installation, and as you row around the pool, you will see other parts of it, and you'll also see that some of the sculptures are hanging. So it becomes something of a kind of, I'd say, there's something all playful about the way that you find things out. You see the sculptures, you could go around them, you get different views of them. It changes every hour of the day, even while you're there. The way that things look just change all the time, because the light floats in through these oculi and the ceilings that were meant for buckets. They were buckets that's where they lowered the buckets and took them up to water whatever it was, cattle herds. And Daniel also put his sculptures exactly in those places. So you have a kind of a game inside it, and people thought about it. I mean, what was a very, I say almost a common comment was that they're like jewels. It was like jewels inside this pool. There's something in it that looks, at certain hours, I can say it looks like velvet black. If you remember, Daniel, when we were there in the evening, then the water goes really very, very dark, and then everything is very, very shiny. It looks like really like jewels. in a kind of black velvet. So there was something about it that people could relate to, not always pinpointing these ideas of that we had about environment and sustainability, but definitely this kind of I'd say magic, and something that in a way activates the pool, turns it from a place that is just historical into something that's happening in the present. And I think that that was very important.
Thank you, Smadar. What beautiful, reflections on this, project. So maybe we should open it up to or Carter, would you like to? Oh, well, we're actually Francine suggested that Carter read his poem, but we're actually doing the poems are going to be read tomorrow evening. We were going to focus today on the ecology, ecological themes. So so maybe we'll open it up for questions. You'll hear it tomorrow night. Well, Carter, how do you feel about reading the poem?
Well, I couldn't read it. I'd have to dash off and get the manuscript.
Yeah. No, it's fine. It's fine. No, it's fine. No, it's better. No, it's better. The thing, the poem is also conceived for water, and it's read in front of the high falls and
yeah, that makes sense. Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
yeah.
I think that we didn't mention that it was also that when you were dealing with a pool, one of the things that your creatures, these kind of these animal sculptures that it's not clear if it's from outer space or if it's Aquarian, also have to do with the history of the geological history, that we had the Sea of Tethys, there's a sea that was covering I'd say almost all the Middle East and parts of Africa. And when you walk around just these areas, you'll always find all sorts of things that you can still see inside just in nature. You still have signs of the sea that covered this area. And today, when we're facing this idea of rising sea levels, that's of concern also to places not just in the Middle East, definitely in Europe. If you think of Holland and just really now, it's already affecting political decisions. And somehow Daniel is like bringing these creatures again and showing a kind of a wondrous side to this, what has become something that we can already fathom, that the change, that our environment is going to change dramatically because of changes of water levels. And he's going into this deep place, this pool, and then bringing these ideas out. And in a way, I think that that's very helpful because people can deal with these questions while they're looking at something that is safe. We know what can go on in the pool. We know that we can go inside and outside, but it's still this feeling that we're talking about these questions that are affecting really huge segments of the population on the earth.
Mm.
Beautiful. Well, yes, Juan has a question.
Yeah, I'm not clear how this space is formed, where the water comes from. Could you explain? And how does that affect the ecosystem in that neighborhood? Is it used for animals to water them only? Could you
Sure.
explain that a little bit for us?
Of course. Of course. Yeah, Juan was asking about how the structure was made and how it's fed. It was made with I don't know if it was carved from living rock, but quite possibly, or it was excavated and then built with stone blocks, and it's fed. I actually had the opportunity to experience a deluge in Israel when I was staying there. I mean, it almost never rains, and then all of a sudden it was raining cats and dogs. I mean, it was just so you got all this rainfall in a very brief period of time, and you have to capture it. And that was, it would collect in this underground basin, and that was one source. And there's a possibility also that there was at one point an aqueduct. This is really from the 9th century. It's medieval, architecture. It's also really interesting, the history of this place, because I think there are even 6 more cisterns that are just that belong to the city of Ramle, and they're dry, but they could become additional. I mean, people love to visit this incredible, beautiful, inspiring, site, just to traverse it in boats and experience it. So, but this is something kind of very intriguing. I learned when the Crusaders came to Ramle, they built a church using the same Gothic arches that they'd seen in the Pool of the Arches. So there's a theory that perhaps the Gothic arch reached Europe through the Arab culture, from the Pool of the Arches. So that would be very interesting.
Yeah.
But but it has and it's also really, for me, it's really intriguing. If you're walking around contemporary Ramle, it's, as Smadar pointed out, it's a very diverse place, and there's a large Arab community, and it tends to be lower socioeconomic kind of area than the major cities of Israel. And to be honest, it kind of it reminded me of living in Naples in 1993. It had a rough and tumble kind of hardscrabble, vibe. But you could walk past the Pool of the Arches, and colorful and really wonderful. And the people are so friendly and warm and kind and generous. But you could walk by the Pool of the Arches. I mean, it would, there's almost nothing to suggest what lies underneath. It's just these, this kind of rock, the capstones of this structure, and then you descend stairs and then it becomes something completely different. And again, the light streaming in from above, these kind of mysterious pools that are always changing, from the black velvet to sometimes a kind of aquamarine, or there are even fish that live in the Pool of the Arches. I mean, it's an extraordinary space. Yeah, really beautiful.
It strikes me that if the water was to dry up, if your sculptures were still there, that would be a very interesting commentary. I keep imaging the sculptures there and no water there.
That's interesting.
And it's a real interesting commentary. The sculptures become the commentary on the water.
Oh, well.
The lack of
Cheryl thought that perhaps it would be interesting if the pools dried up. She could imagine the sculptures kind of like shipwrecks in the space. I mean, it would be interesting too. I mean, I realize that. I mean, that these other spaces in Ramle could be fascinating contemporary art spaces too. I mean, there's just really suggestive and compelling spaces.
Keep reading the films. How did that occur within the architecture of the site?
Francine was asking how the projections took place. Would you like to, of the poetry? Would you like to take that one, Smadar? Maybe say a word about the project preceded ours.
Yes, we've been. The pool became a contemporary art space when the center was founded. That's 2019. We started some projects there. And the former one was a video and sound project. It was important for me as a curator to bring different takes on it. And Daniel's work, which is basically sculptural, was fantastic. But again, this is something that was started during COVID, and then we developed it, was this idea of turning it also into a poetry and reading event. And we had readings in 3 languages, in Hebrew, Arabic, and English. And I'd say a very important part of the vision of the Contemporary Art Center is that it works with all communities, and we everything that we publish, for instance, is trilingual. Also, Daniel's catalog is in 3 languages. And this reading inside the pool with a resonance of it, I can't say that it has an echo, but it does have a resonance in the space. There's a very special sound, which is created both by the architecture and by the water. And so we had screenings of the poets that were reading in English, and that was projected on the walls when your images are also reflected inside the water. So the poetry becomes almost in a physical way part of the space while it's there. And it's something I like. This was for me something important, that we had something ephemeral together with something that was there during the exhibition, of course, as something permanent. And so that we had the poetry in English that was on video, and we had poets that were reading live during an event. And I think that it created a kind of it gave another historical layer to the space, because people that were there and experienced this reading, experienced these screenings, will always have this kind of memory when they go into the place. And that's something that I like, that a place kind of evolves its own contemporary history in a way.
Francine said it kind of operatic too. Like the Gesamtkunstwerk, the Wagnerian idea of a total artwork in the space. Very beautiful. Any other questions? Well, in that case, I'd like to thank the panelists. Really quite wonderful. And so we'll regroup tomorrow.